Welcome to the Blonde Runner podcast with Coach Lora Erickson, where she shares her healthy living tips as a running and triathlon coach and mother of 4.
Hi friends, Coach Lora Erickson here, and I wanted to talk to you about the ABCs of setting priority races. I'm not sure if you've heard of this concept before, but it's really important, I think, when it comes to goal setting, particularly for races. So let me just explain. A race would be a race that is your top priority. It's your, the race that you're mainly focusing on for that year. I would say usually it's anywhere from 1 to 3 different races. This is the race that you're peaking for. Maybe, for instance, you're trying to qualify for Boston, and that's your big race that you want to qualify for Boston. Or maybe it is Boston. It just depends on what it is. Usually when I'm working with people, I like to know what particular races they're working towards. And then I like to work backwards from that point. And that's when I establish when a B race would be. And a B race is a race that helps you get to that main A race. So it would be something I often like to bridge the gap. Often when people come to me, they want to qualify for Boston and it's many, many months away. And so this is a race that helps us get to that goal, but it's a lot sooner. And a B race is one that you would, like the A race is you for sure sign up for. A B race is something you also sign up for, but it's not quite as important as your A race. So it's something that you're using to get you to that A race in the best shape that you can. One of the reasons that you can't have a lot of A races in a year is if you train properly, you have to peak for that race. And if you're tapering, trying to peak, really building your miles and doing it properly, you're only really able to do a certain number of races. So, all right. So with the B races, things that would help, like I like to use this Boston qualifying because this is often why I'm hired. Or maybe it's your first time you've ever done a marathon. So a half marathon would be a really good thing to do, or maybe several. Another reason that you want to have these B races, it takes the pressure off that A race. And so I've had people before do an A race and we're training for that, and that's our main focus. And maybe we didn't do a lot of races building up to it. Maybe it didn't work out. But then they put a lot of pressure on themselves for one race. So it's really nice to have those B races so it takes a little bit of the pressure off. Plus, I found as an athlete myself, I'm a lot more confident going into that A race, knowing that I just did an effort that was a hard, strong effort in a race more recently. So it just helps build your confidence with those B races. It also gives you an opportunity to test out nutrition or work on pacing, but it's a real dress rehearsal. Sometimes we have a hard time doing that on our own. I often will have my athletes doing time trials, which is similar to what I like to call a C race. So a C race is something you maybe don't sign up for until the last minute if we do decide to do it, but it's definitely an event that could fall out. Often I'll do a time trial event with people where it's kind of a dress rehearsal in a sense, but you're not paying for any race and you're not competing with other people. You're doing it on your own as a fast effort, maybe really trying out, again, nutrition and things. And those are important to have in there as well. But again, a C race can be something that drops out pretty easily. It's kind of a take it or leave it or a practice type race. So when I am working with people, and I really encourage you, if you're listening in and you're really not sure how to do this for yourself, I would encourage you to set up I do consultation sessions where I help people design what their season would look like. Some people can handle a lot of racing, other people can't or shouldn't. If you're fairly new to running, unless you're using that running as more training, then it's probably okay to race more often, but you don't want to push yourself to racing so often that it can be damaging to your training. So the trouble with racing, I think a lot too much, is that it does, at least for me, it affects my sleep. And it does, obviously you have to rest for it and then you have to recover from it. And so those things can take away from your training. So you want to make sure you get enough in, but not too much where it doesn't help you towards your goal. So other components that you want to think of are one of the reasons these A, B, and C races help is it helps you have better focus. I know a lot of people that just train to train. They're not training for a particular race. I think it's easier to talk yourself out of working out when you don't have a race coming up. So I really like people to have races in mind. It creates more focus to your training. If you know you're going to be training for a marathon or a half marathon or even a 5K, you know the end result of what you want. It helps you build up properly. And again, of course, it bridges, having those A, B, and C races. It helps keep you focused. So those miniature goals that get you to your big goal are a lot closer, bridges that gap. So, and then when you're having your training and your season all planned out, that helps especially with a coach, to help you actually taper properly and peak at the right time so that you're actually getting the most out of your training, and then you're actually producing the result that you want at your race. So definitely look through your season. I think this is a great time of year actually to really start planning if you haven't already. I really like it at the end of the year to plan for the next year. I always allow some wiggle room in terms of you've got to see what your body will adapt and how it will adapt to the increased mileage. And so you kind of have to be flexible a little bit too. But that big qualifying race or whatever you're trying to do, you need to have at least that established and then work backwards from there. So just want to give you some more structure here. So let's say I was working with somebody that wanted to qualify for Boston Marathon in June. Some of the races that I would encourage them to participate in, depending on how many miles they're at now. This is February, so they've got a good 4 months of training, which is ideal if they're experienced runner. That would give us enough time to train and prepare for that properly. I would want them to be racing 2 or 3 half marathons before that time. That way we can really test everything out in the racing scenario. I would, sometimes I've had athletes training or racing at the pace they may do a marathon or slightly faster. So it may not be all out. We're doing it for testing. So those are, depending on the athlete, we want to see what that, if we're trying to do it for conditioning that race, that's going to be a little different than actually testing things out. So maybe the race that was a little closer to their actual important day race might be more at pacing that the marathon would be. I would never have them go exactly that pacing because that's going to be a lot slower than they can do the half in, but maybe a percentage. Plus, they won't be quite as fatigued, but it does give us an opportunity to practice the nutrition. I would say for a marathon, that first half nutrition is incredibly important, and it's often what people mess up on when they're doing marathon. But even if you're listening in and you're thinking, well, I just want to do a 10K. It's so funny because people say just, and it's like 10Ks are pretty hard, actually. You have to go a really fast pace for a lot longer, or, hold that pacing. It is shorter in the end, but you're kind of holding that fast pace for longer in a sense. I hope that makes sense. But you want to incorporate 5Ks in there to do that race. If you're training for a 5K, what about doing miles at the track, or you're doing 800 meter repeats? You don't see that many races that are like that, but you can certainly do time trials at the track. And so again, incorporating some of that stuff that will help build your confidence. When it comes to goal setting, I do want to touch on that here. As you have your A, B, and C, planned out on your calendar, and you figure those things out. Other things that you want to do is plan those. A lot of people that hire me, they have an idea they want to qualify for Boston. We'll look it up and see what range of time that they need for that. Then as we start training, we'll see how realistic that goal becomes. I'm a big advocate, and for range goals. And if you've listened to any of my YouTube, you'll see I have some goal setting ones on that, and I talk about having range goals. And I think that's really important because sometimes you get to the starting line and it's maybe not your best stomach day, right? Or maybe your legs don't feel quite as good. But if you have only one, very hard line of what you have to run each mile at with not a lot of wiggle room, then you can get discouraged pretty quickly if you get off pacing. And so often what I like to do is have a range, and then I can adapt as I go. I like to have a range, but then have kind of an average time that I'm trying to do. And as you know, in racing, the terrain is not always flat, especially in Utah. And so often when I'm running, I will put a little time in the bank, what I like to call, and then I keep my mind, that's what keeps my mind occupied, is figuring out my pacing. But that's something that you need to consider when you're goal setting for each race. As you're goal setting, it really helps to, maybe you'll have a goal for a race, maybe you know a time that you need. You're setting your range of pacing for that race. That will become more fine-tuned as you get closer to the race based on your training. So I highly encourage you to have goals not only for that race that's months away, right? But now as you're doing these B races that are a little closer, you'll have goals for those. And they may relate, of course, to your A goal. However, I encourage you to break it down even further and have weekly goals. Maybe meeting all your training requirements, maybe pushing yourself to faster pacing for whatever particular intervals that you're doing. I think it's really important to have goals throughout all of your training, including every day. I know for me, I'll wake up and I'll think, okay, today I'm really going to work on staying hydrated, or today I'm going to take some extra time to stretch a little bit better, or do some more foam rolling, or do some more strengthening before bed. You can, if you're in tune with your body and you can listen to your body, setting those goals like throughout each day adds up. And by the time you get to your actual races, you're going to do a lot better. You're going to perform a lot better because you have these goals. As the things that you're also practicing in your training is definitely going to help. Because when you get to race day, you want to experience whatever you've experienced in your training, even mentally, is something that you can bring in to the race and race day. So practicing all those things that help with racing during the week, during your training, those kind of things are going to help you. So again, I think, and this is kind of a shorter podcast on this one, but I encourage you to try to figure out what you want to do A, B, C race wise. Take first, choose that most important 1 or 2 or 3 races, and then work backwards from that point to determining what are those good B races. I encourage people to race twice a month. If you're in really good shape, I encourage you to race twice a month. And even incorporating 5Ks and things in there, even if you're doing a marathon, you can do that. If it were let's say it's a C race or even a B race, you may do like a 5K in the morning, and then you may add some extra miles and do a double, day where you're doing some afternoon miles that maybe slower, but you're getting, those race miles in, and then you're going to get some more miles in the afternoon. That's kind of a way you can do a long run with having some of it as speed. So something to think about when you're doing that. So definitely plan in the nutrition components and making sure that all those pieces are in place, so when you get to your race, you've built in those training experiences, so it takes some pressure off the big race. Anyway, hope that helps for you, and until next time, live well. Thank you again for listening in to the podcast. I wanted to encourage you to like and subscribe, and please share this so others are learning about it so we can continue growing it. You can also find me on Instagram at The Blonde Runner, and that's BLONDE with an E on there. And you can also find me on Instagram at Coach Lora Erickson, and that's LORA. ICKSON. And thanks again for listening in. And until next time, live well.